So good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone here. We're so excited to have everyone. I know that as I was sharing with my faculty members prior to getting on the call, I know that there is a number of places you can be at this time, or a number of Zoom meetings for that matter, that you could be at this time, but you've chosen this afternoon to be with us. And for that, we are very grateful, and we thank you so much for joining us. I am Janine San Luis. I'm your Director of Corporate Relations here at the College of Business at FIU, and I have the distinct pleasure of presenting to you our virtual industry open house. And with that, we have a number of great things and program items for you to talk about today. But just to walk you through a little bit about what we're going to be going through. So the purpose of the industry open house is really quite simple here. We want to make certain that as either a current or potential corporate partner, we ensure the success with working with FIU Business. We want to assure that everyone here has the right connections at FIU to develop a relationship that best suits their company needs. So that is the purpose and why, and our why of why we do this industry open house. Some of you, and I know that those of you who are joining us today, some of you were part of our fall in-person industry open house. So it's nice to see you all again. I know that you had mentioned to us back in the fall that you'd like to see this much more often. So we heard you, and now we're taking it virtual. So here's the flow of the afternoon for you all so that you can kind of get a sense for how we're going to be incorporating some of the things that you can get involved in. So one of the favorite things of our industry partners was, in fact, our lightning talks with our faculty members. And here this afternoon, we have 4 amazing faculty members that are in their own right, experts in their field, and are here to share with us a couple of things that are happening in the industry and how that is actually taking place as we look at the world in a different lens with this COVID type lens that we're looking at, okay? So we're gonna be talking, or faculty are gonna be in a lightning round of 15 minutes. We're holding them to it with the 15 minutes of their presentation. We want everybody to hold their questions to the end. You might not see a chat option for a reason, but we are going to take questions. We're going to allow for you to unmute yourself after the entire session is over with our faculty members and ask direct questions as it pertains to their presentation. So that is the rules of engagement for the lightning round talks. Later on, what we'll do for those of you who remain here in the session and want to participate in networking, we will be doing and hosting networking sessions following our lightning talk round, where we are going to be placing the participants here today in breakout rooms, and we are going to facilitate some networking. So we're going to be trying this out. We want to make sure that we still stay connected with one another and participate and get to know what each other's either challenges are, maybe opportunities, and see that through. After that, we'll have closing remarks, and that will recap the afternoon. So again, thank you so much for joining us. So as we transition into our first speaker, I wanted to make sure that you all know that this session is being recorded, and it's recorded for us to be able to amplify this message and be able to reach our partners and our alums that maybe they couldn't join us this afternoon. So just please keep that in mind, that the session is being recorded. So with that, our first speaker is our very own Bill Newburry with Building Strategic Capabilities in Emerging Markets. I'm going to now unshare my screen, Dr. Newburry, so that you can go ahead and share your screen. Perfect.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and I apologize. You may not hear it, but it seems like my neighbor decided to cut a tree down or or use a very loud lawnmower. So I don't. If it's too loud, let me know, but I can hear it, but hopefully it's not too bothersome for you. So I'm going to talk real briefly on the topic of building strategic capabilities in emerging markets. This is a topic I've been doing research on for quite a number of years, and it's one that's very close to my heart. And Jan said, pick things that you're passionate about. So this is what want to talk about. And so, why is it my screen? So this project is basically, was motivated. It's a research project I've been working on for 3 years with 2 collaborators, Alvaro Cuervo-Pazura from Northeastern University and Sam Park from Nanyang Business School in Singapore. And we published a book in 2016 on emerging markets and the challenges that they face when they go overseas. So the book was really looked at your problems. They're managed to invest overseas, but when they get there, they have problems, setting up the operation, integrating with their home country, expanding, dealing with issues of reputation, dealing with hiring local talent, and a whole number of things. And so, as a follow-up to that project, we decided, we wanted to find out, so we know what the problems are. Now, what are the capabilities that emerging market multinationals need to succeed when they do go international? So this second part of the project looked at, now what are the success stories? What are the capabilities that firms need when they go overseas, when they're starting from an emerging market country? And so this second part of the project is resulting in a second book. It's an edited book that will come out in December. We're very happy. Just 2 weeks ago, I got the cover art for the books, which is why I can put it here. So it was very timely. And it's actually, we've done the pre-edit, so now they're working on proofs, and it'll be out again in December of this year. And we didn't do this book alone. So this one we worked with a collaborative team in 12 different countries. So each country we had 1 or more partners. We had 6 countries in Latin America, 3 in Eastern Europe. We had South Africa and Africa, and we had China and India. So the book basically, we had a group of, probably I think 23 people total that basically went and interviewed top managers and CEOs in their country of emerging market multinationals and asked them, what did it take to succeed? What are the capabilities that you think are most important to succeed? This is a partial view of the team we met. This was like 2.5 years ago. We met in Shanghai at China Europe International Business School. They had the guy who designed the Louvre, also Ian Pei, also designed their business school, so that's why that may look familiar. And basically, the resulting project, we had 72 companies were interviewed in 12 countries. We had 6 interviews per country. And the idea was, look across a range of high-tech, low-tech, and service industries and find out, what the successful capabilities are. And since we don't have much time, I'm just going to flash up. These are the companies that were studied, a lot of them, and I'm going to move on to some of the results since I only have a few minutes to go over a whole book. So first of all, I just, this is a very, it's a very basic chart, but it looked just at a very aggregate level, what kind of capabilities did firms identify when we did these interviews? And so it's hard to kind of see in the small writing at the bottom, but a few things emerged as being really important. And the ones that really came out on top, one, understanding local customer needs. 56 out of the 72 companies identified this as really being crucial. Relationship capabilities, 47 out of 72. General sales capabilities, local product service adaptation, and the ability to develop resources internally. And so, at the top level, these were the things that people identified. I'm going to go into a couple of them in more depth, but again, I'm moving quickly just for time. And so understanding local customer needs. Now, this seems pretty basic for any type of business, but when we think of developed countries like the U.S., a lot of times we just assume we make a great product, we're going to take it over to another country, and they're just going to like what we make because we're so fabulous, right? This isn't really the way it works, and particularly when you come from an emerging market where cultures are different. Sometimes this assumption that I can just take what I do here and do it somewhere else easily doesn't always work. So understanding local customer needs is definitely a well-established. It's part of international business, but this really suggests that in the interviews, all commonly said, being locally embedded was very important. One example came out really clearly in South Africa. So in South Africa, the interviewed firms kind of talked about the importance that, the idea that, when they go to Africa, when they go to other African countries, some people call it coming to Africa. And that really, seems arrogant to all these other countries, because South Africa is part of Africa too. Why do you say you're coming to Africa when you're in Africa as well? And this quote from the South African executive: "You can't serve people with arrogance. You can't come to East Africa and tell me for these long years how you must actually cook rice. You just don't do that." I mean, and this theme came up again and again in the industries, in the 12 interviews in the 12 countries. This quote, which I broke up, highlights the second really popular capability, a really important capability, was relationships. And when we looked at the relationships that came out in the different studies, we found out that relationships matter. And at some point, there are all kinds of relationships, and with all kinds of different people matter. So this broke up quote from one of our executives we interviewed in Poland basically said, in the US, you have to know your partner as a person, and mix business and personal credibility. Or in German, you're just a firm. So in Germany, you just sit down and negotiate a contract. And then in the Middle East, you have to develop a personal and business relationship, and it takes time. And you have to allow them to negotiate and win something. So you can't just dictate the terms. In the Middle East, you have to be very careful how you interact. In Asia, again, it was important that the partner gets something in order to be satisfied. And then they mentioned, in the Soviet Union, which for Poland's a very big partner country, you have to sit down with them and drink and become friends. So basically, the idea is, in every market, it's the same, they said. You have to build the relationships, but they're very different. One of the interviews I was personally involved with was a company called Higer. It's a bus manufacturing company in China. They actually gave us all bus models when we were there. And basically, they said one of the biggest things for them was, not relationships with other parties, but relationship with actually the Chinese government and their embassies, not in China, but in the other countries where they dealt with. They sold a lot of buses in the Middle East, and they said their biggest asset was, having a good relationship with the Chinese consulate in each of the countries where they operate. Because basically governments buy buses, the Chinese consulate in the country would talk to the government, the local government, and kind of broker that relationship. Another part of the book, which we looked at, in all the countries and in aggregate, was, some contingency factors. And three that we really looked at were, how did the relationships and the capabilities needed vary by industry? How do they vary based on the degree of multinationality of the firm? And how do they vary based on the home country and the region? Now, not to freak out Yannon, I'm not going to go through all of these. I just picked a couple examples in the industry category because, this could be, we were joking before this started, I could go on for 15 hours, and, in 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to keep it short. So I just picked a couple of industry examples. So first, one thing in industry that's very important is research and development. This is very, and we found out, in the high-tech firms in our industry, 68% of them identified this as important versus, 30, 20%, in the service and low-tech categories. So, but even in the low-tech industries, we did find examples of this. And one big example that I really liked was a company called Baby First. We interviewed their CEO in China outside of Beijing, outside of Shanghai, and they were said, they're thinking 10 years down the road, maybe no one's going to drive a car, and they make car seats for babies, and they have to figure out, if all the cars go automatic, what do they do? And so they're, so basically the quote, says we still have a need to protect kids during travel. So they're already thinking ahead 10 years ahead. How can we design some kind of service where we protect babies, even if it's not in a car or if it's a self-driven car? And they're already starting to put things into their baby seats like, temperature sensors, so they can see if the baby has a temperature, or, things that sense the mood and so on. And they tie them to your smartphone. or to other cars. So that they can monitor babies and keep them safe. And the idea is, they're thinking ahead in the future cars that are self-driving or whatever. How can we design a product for that industry? At the low-tech level, the top capability that came out that was identified by 73% of the low-tech firms was supply chain management. And in Colombian firms, Sempertex I use as an example here, they make basically rubber and latex products, rubber gloves, very, very important now in the current era. But basically, they needed, because they're not competing based on quality necessarily, they're competing based on price. They need to have an efficient supply chain, and at the back end, they basically established a distribution center to make sure they can get, if order comes in, they can get the product out the same day. And at the front end, they need to make sure they can acquire latex. So they're basically purchasing over 3,000 tons of latex a year from suppliers in Guatemala and in Colombia, trying to make sure they have the input. So at the low tech firms, supply chain was one of the main capabilities they mentioned. And then for service firms, this entrepreneurship was a big deal, and so Dileep will be happy about this. I hope. Where basically this was identified by the slightly more than the majority of service firms, and basically the idea is service firms often require creative ways to interact with their host country environment. Service firms involve interaction with customers, and so to be innovative in these environments, you really have to have an entrepreneurial mindset. And this came out in a lot of the interviews. Dr. Consulta is a Brazilian medical company. It's kind of like a doctor, as a Dr. Consulta implies. Basically, they provide health services to people at the very, very low income levels. So people who are being completely missed by the government systems that are in place. And so basically, the firm has had to use a unique set of entrepreneurial capabilities, relationships with important people in the Brazilian government and the market to help address a segment that was really being left out by the population. And they've been very, very successful in doing this and providing health services to parts of Brazil that were not getting serviced at all. Okay, so kind of getting ready to wrap up, because I know Janen's probably saying, your time's getting close, if not over. So at the end of the book, we kind of came up with a multi-level model, where we looked at, capabilities we found in the interviews were needed at different levels. There are things that came from the whole home country that were important. There are things, at the industry level that are important. There were things at the firm level that firms needed to do, and there were things specifically related to management capabilities or management, what managers did that were important. So we did find, a multi-level slate of capabilities that were really important when we looked at the aggregate of the firms. And like I said, we were really excited to work on this project. It's been, we've been working on it several years, an international team. To our knowledge, it's the first team of researchers in so many emerging markets doing a book like this at once. A lot of people have studied, China or Brazil or maybe a few countries together, but have, countries across all the BRICS countries plus several other important emerging markets together in one study to look for really commonalities we think is a big plus. And so with that, I'll say thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this session. I look forward to any questions or comments you may have, and I'll turn it back over to Janet.
Thank you. Bill, you have 37 seconds left.
Okay. I have a whole bunch of backup slides I could go through if you want. You can see it's true. See,
thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your time. For everybody who has some questions, if you can hold them till the end, we will be happy to answer them. So thank you again, Bill, and we really appreciate it for you sharing those, just kind of like that whole impact that you shared. So next up, our very own Dr. Bill Hardin. Bill, I know this is a lot of questions that are might be coming to you regarding this, and a lot of people have been freaking out about the market. So can't wait to hear about what you have to share about the real estate market. So please take it away. I will stop my screen share at this time. to allow you to come to our virtual stage. And I'll ask you to unmute as well. Perfect. Okay. You're all set.
Okay, I don't have all the slides that Dr. Newburry had, so I'm just going to have to talk. Hopefully you can hear me. As you can tell, I'm actually in my office at FIU. We're having like everyone else in real estate, we're in the process of learning how to repopulate our facilities. So we're having a run through on what's available, what's not available. You know, have they cleaned the cobwebs out of the you know, corners of the offices, and basically everything's been in good order. The air conditioner works. We're all excited by being back here, at least for some time. But I think before I talk specifically about some real estate types, I think one of the things that even highlights the small group of people who are here today is that there's kind of a psychological barrier about simply being in this place and being outside of the area where people are where people are doing their, in essence, hiding out from the coronavirus. So I think there's a psychology to it, and I think it was just interesting that the small group of us who are here, we all kind of felt there was some type of psychology simply about leaving our homes, leaving where we've been, you know, sheltering, leaving, you know, kind of an environment that we're very familiar with, even to come into an office that we use all the time. There's just some uncertainty there. And I think that's what's happening throughout the real estate sector. So if I start with the commercial sector, I'll start with the residential first, and then I'll go by sector in the commercial side. In the residential side, of course, it's difficult to show properties. So right now, if you look at the data, there's been a dramatic reduction in the following: number of listings that are active. Listings have either been taken off the market or have not been put on the market. So if you look at the inventory of property that's for sale today, it's at a historic low, measured in months of inventory. And that's driven primarily to the fact that people don't have the ability to show the property. You can do videos, you can do all sorts of virtual, you know, games, pictures, 360s, and there's a lot of research that shows there's some value to doing that. But real estate is very tactile in some sense, and there's just been no volume, and actually people have been taking a wait and see attitude. The question is not whether real estate is good or bad, but how quickly will the economy start back? What are people's incomes really going to be? Are the furloughs going to be converted into permanent job losses? Real estate is a tertiary business. By that we mean that real estate, the reason to own a home, the reason to have an office, is all based on some economic activity. So when we're looking at real estate in the residential side, people are concerned about income levels, they're concerned about job security, and they've by and large decided to take off about 3 or 4 months and see how the opening looks in June, July, and August. Also, of course, there's been a dramatic increase, of course, in people who are not employed. So the issue comes down to, are we hiring people? Are people moving from one job to the other? So there's a lot of uncertainty there. And in a transaction business like real estate, transactions are not happening. Now, in the production side for residential real estate, the pipeline stays active because construction has been deemed in most states an essential activity. So if you look at some of the towers, some of the commercial real estate projects, you will see that people have been working on those for the last 3 months, except in places like New York, Boston, and parts of California. But if you look in Miami, construction is still waiting to take place. And part of the reason is for residential nationally, we're under supplied with quality, affordable, and workforce housing. So there's pent-up demand, and so we anticipate that's going to be pretty good. The other thing that's kind of uncertain is what are interest rates going to be. Right now, refi rates are at historic lows. So if you have equity in your house and you have steady employment, what you're seeing is a rush to refi, given the low interest rates. So we think probably in the near term, it's going to be a trade-off between uncertainty in the economy and the ability to borrow money at a very low rate. as a potential stabilizer for residential real estate. With regard to commercial real estate, if no one is running their business, it's hard for them to pay rent. If no one is getting income, it's hard for them to pay rent. So once again, since real estate is dependent on economic activity, if we go by sector, we can identify the sectors that have been the most impacted. Of course, number one is hospitality and tourism. Hospitality has high operating leverage, meaning that for most hotel properties, you have to have a certain amount of activity before you generate any cash flow, which is operating leverage, especially for the top high-end hotels. And when you are losing 80 or 90% of your revenue, you have what is called a negative cash flow. And you have a fairly serious negative cash flow if you have any indebtedness. So if you were to look at defaults and deferrals and forbearances, the two areas that have seen the most in the last 90 days are the hotel sector and the retail sector. And as you might imagine, especially for the small operators, if they don't have revenue, they don't have a lot of capital to pay rent. There was a conference call last week from NAREIT, which is National Association of Real Estate Investment Trusts. And some REITs are collecting in the retail area 75 to 80% of their rents. And as you go down by type of tenant, the more mom and pop, you get down to collection rates of 20 to 30%. We did a Hollow School of Real Estate presentation about a week and a half ago, Monday, the 18th, I believe, or maybe it was the 11th. It was in the last 2 weeks or so. And one of the presenters there, Victor Balestis, indicated in one of his new projects, 100% of the retail tenants were not paying rent. And that's the Park Square project in Aventura, which is a new project, a very affluent area. But all the restaurants are curated in the sense that they went out and got local players that had a following. They're not national chains, so they're dependent pretty much on being open and generating cash flow. And what's going to happen is there'll be a forbearance agreement. And ultimately, the people who had a good business will be brought back into play. And the ones that had a poor business probably are out of the arena for a while. Because here's what people recognize is that if I'm running a local neighborhood mom and pop business and it's well run and it's been successful, that's going to be the same tenant who's going to be successful in that space next month, 5 months from now, and a year from now. So there's a lot of willingness to work with people who are good operators, even if in the interim period they're unable to pay their full rents. So if we talk about commercial real estate, we have the first project, which is hotel, then we have retail. Those have been the most impacted. Now we move down into residential multifamily. We look at office and we look at industrial. And what you're going to see in there is that multifamily has had some issues with regard to collection of rents, primarily in the Northeast. Nationally, for Class A, B plus to A, the collection rate is around 82% of rents. If you go into a lower cycle, the small units, full plex, that's not nearly as good. Anecdotally, they're saying collection rates are much less than 80%, perhaps in the 60% range, depending on location. So there's not a really good national number. It really comes down to location. In South Florida, there's certain areas. We talked with some graduates of FIU, and they're at 55, 60%, and they're in the Class B, maybe C plus B to B range product. And these are people who work primarily in hospitality areas as tenants. And that's the biggest problem in South Florida is in that working class, middle class job loss area. Once again, as the jobs come back, you're talking about people who can't pay because of situational issues, not strategic non-payment. Where some people have had some problems on the Class A or the areas that have a little bit higher demographics is a subset of tenants who are willing to what we call strategically default on their lease, which is they can pay, they just don't. And of course, we had that with the mortgage crisis, and we'll see it here. Those are in some of the higher end multifamily where the typical household income is over $100,000 a year. The people are working from home. The people know that they're getting paid or they're getting some income, and they have simply decided not to pay as opposed to inability to pay. And there's always a little bit of that. So that's multifamily, of course. If people get back to work, that'll remedy itself. And then we get down to industrial and office. Industrial is the strongest sector for real estate cash flows now. It's a business to business market. So most of the tenants do have more capacity than an individual might have. The kind of weird thing about industrial is there's actually even increased demand for industrial space, because when everybody's surfing on the internet or buying from Instacart or anything, if you think about what you might have purchased over the last 90 days, it may have come from a warehouse or a last mile type delivery system. And so there's a big bullishness on industrial. If you look at the REITs that are valued continuously, the REIT that focus on industrial have seen the least price reduction, actually only about 15% down from March, whereas some of the specialized retail are down 50% in valuation in 90 days, which leads us back into office. I'm sitting in my office. Probably everybody on this call is going, man, I don't want to go back in my office because I can work from home, or I've learned to work from home. So the uncertainty in office, which historically is being seen as a very core real estate holding, is impacted by kind of a philosophical argument that people have made, which is, now that we know that things can be done much more remotely, does everyone need an office? Do they need to come in all the time? What is the actual amount of space we need? So the concern for a lot of office is not that you're not going to get paid now or through the lease. It's when that lease comes up and someone decides, well, we've decided to reduce our footprint by half because we're going to let people work from home primarily and not have to come into the office. So they're all different nuances, but if you go through all those examples, what you find is that real estate generally is dependent on the economic environment. We in South Florida think real estate is unique and stands by itself, but the truth is the real estate market, the cash flows and the valuation are very dependent on economic cycle. They're very dependent on cash flow, and we're dependent on the world getting better. The other thing that's kind of unique about real estate, and for many of you who have a mortgage, you understand this, is that if the tenants aren't paying, the mortgage needs to get paid. And most underwriters have what we call a debt coverage ratio, which is the cash flow divided by the debt service of 1.3, 1.4, 1.25. But every month they get cash flow coming in, and then they spend it or they give it back to investors. So there's a liquidity component to real estate with regard to capital stack, which may be a little bit unique in the sense that people don't have income to pay mortgage indebtedness. And as I started about 5 or 10 minutes ago, that we've already seen in hospitality and in retail, which is no one's paying rent, so people can't pay the mortgage. So then it becomes 30 or 60 days past due, and a forbearance agreement needs to be done. A couple of my students that I'm teaching right now are in the mortgage CMBS market, and they indicated to me that they're hiring now because they're going to need people actually to work through the issues. It's easy when people are paying rent and then paying their mortgage. Okay, when they quit, now everybody has to renegotiate both of those deals, follow up on all the rent changes, do all the paperwork. So I actually have gotten 2 emails today for people in loan servicing for commercial real estate and in valuation services, because every one of these loans has some loan to value ratio, and every commercial institutionally owned property has a appraisal cycle. So there's a lot more business that's going to be done in compliance and in estimation of valuation. So in a nutshell, that's all I have to say. I apologize for not having all the interesting fun facts that Bill had.
Okay.
But I will tell you that the real estate problems are not just in the US, they're kind of a global as well, which is any time that people are unable to pay or generate revenue, real estate is at risk, because real estate is dependent on the economics in South Africa, if it's in South Africa, if it's in Shanghai, if it's in Hong Kong, Beijing, you name the city, New York. Many of you have read about in the New York Times just the opinions that New York is going to be devastated because of the real estate setback, which is everybody's going to move to New Jersey or something like that. They may move out of New York, but I wouldn't bet on New Jersey. Maybe part New Jersey, part Connecticut, and part Miami-Dade County, where they don't have to pay income tax. So all those are kind of evolving ideas that people are now thinking about, because they have time and they have effort, and they've seen the devastation in the market. In some of these markets, like New York, were some of the most vibrant markets, and now you have 2 or 3 months in New York, case of New York, with very little economic activity. So I'm going to turn it back over to you guys, and then I think Dileep is next. I'm not sure, but I'm sure we'll figure out ways to be entrepreneurial and make money outside.
Thank you, Bill. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the information, and for those of us who are on this, but even the ones that are listening to it later on, what a wealth of knowledge of just kind of looking at what's happening. And thank you for the analysis, Bill. That was fantastic.
Well, thanks for putting this on, and at least we have plenty of social distancing here in CBC when we only have 4 people here. So, we can work at like 5% or 4% capacity and not have a problem.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
And I checked your office out. It's still there, so you're good.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I wanted to know if it was all good and okay. Yeah. Thank you for letting me know. All right. So next up on our virtual stage is Dileep Rao. He is doing such incredible work and lots of life work in this space of unicorn entrepreneurship, and what these entrepreneurs are being resilient upon. So excited to hear about your talk and what you have to say, Dileep. So please take it on and take it over. I'm going to unmute you or ask you to unmute. There we are. Perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
See the slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, I'll be talking about why 99% of unicorns take off with skills and not venture capital. And one of the big myths today is that you need venture capital to grow. And so I'm going against prevailing wisdom. Basically, I'm defining unicorn entrepreneurs as those who build ventures from idea to either $1 billion in sales and valuation. Those are billion-dollar entrepreneurs, or $100 million in sales, because in many cases it is tough to get the valuation. And I have a long history in this. I used to be a venture financier, and I financed 2 billion-dollar entrepreneurs and $700 million entrepreneurs when I was active. And then as an academic, I interviewed $7 billion entrepreneurs, $2,600 million entrepreneurs, and researched an additional 80. The net just of all of this is, where do unicorn entrepreneurs fit into venture development? And they grow more than corporations and entrepreneurs at a higher rate, and with less risk than venture capital and entrepreneurs. They do take much less risk with their money. So why are they important? I put this slide in just to show you that these are some of the unicorn entrepreneurs. In the top, you'll recognize all of them. And they are the publicly held ones, the one in the light orange or whatever that color that is. In the light green, those are the ones who didn't get venture capital. You may know some of them, the top 4, But the bottom four, you may know the companies, but you may not know them. Because one of the luxuries you have when you're filthy rich is you don't have to tell people who you are, unless, of course, your ego is big. But they started and built some of the world's greatest companies, and I think we can learn from them. Even if you are a startup entrepreneur and have no dreams of becoming $1 million or billion-dollar entrepreneur. What are some key aspects of unicorn entrepreneurship? First of all, they focused on what I call revolutionary innovation, and what many people call the theoretical term, and not evolutionary innovation. So what does this mean? This is evolutionary innovation. You have, incidentally, this was my doctoral dissertation, and I never thought I'd use it for the rest of my life, and all of a sudden it's come back. But evolutionary innovation is small improvements in existing technology. I call it minor with quotes, basically because others can imitate very easily. But revolutionary innovation is a brand new way to satisfy an old need. It uses new technologies and requires a new business structure. And that's why existing companies have a difficult time adjusting to it. So some historical examples in computers, PCs versus mainframes. So many of the mainframe companies have gone under. Retail, online versus on-site, and you can see the carnage in on-site right now. Information online versus in print, you can see the carnage in print. The ones that are happening right now are medicine, telemedicine versus inpatient, and in education, in-class versus online. And I wrote a blog about 3 years ago. I write for Forbes. And basically I said in 10 years, half the business schools in the country and the world will go under. And I still think I'll be right. And there's a reason why I made that prediction, because 3 years ago, I expected to retire in 10 years. And after that, who cares whether I'm right or wrong? Disruptive innovation, which is a term that has been very popular because of Clayton Christensen. Essentially, he's narrowly defined it. And so you can see that slide as to when disruption occurs. You can also see when the unicorn entrepreneurs enter and when VCs fund. So VCs don't take the high risk that the entrepreneurs do. But disruption occurs when revolutionary technology improves and when price becomes attractive. That's how they define disruptive technologies, which is when the mass market switches and the old technologies and the old companies die. They focus on emerging trends, not mature trends. So that arrow shows where exactly in the trend they get on. And I don't expect you to go through each one of these, but you can see from that middle column that every one of them jumped on an emerging trend. And I found this to be the one truth in business. If you want to build a huge business, get on an emerging trend and at the right time. And they don't create the trend. They jump on a trend after it's been created. They are fast movers, not first movers. One of the biggest lies in business today is that you have to be a first mover. It's a term that every journalist basically repeats as if it's wisdom. It isn't. But timing is crucial. And if you look at these people, every one of them were not first movers. They were fast movers. They imitated somebody else. But imitation somehow has a negative connotation in business. You have to innovate. Only 11% of first movers dominated. This is a FRB, stands for Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, so I hope you can believe them. But fast movers entered before takeoff. It becomes very difficult to enter after takeoff. And takeoff usually takes 3 to 11 years. And this is a terrific research done by a guy called Carl Ulrich. They focus on improved strategy, not an innovative product. This is the second biggest lie. And unfortunately, universities also believe in this. And they focus on innovative products. Shark Tank, one of the biggest lies in TV today. And if you look at this, the innovative products are in the middle column. Napster, CPM, Netscape, VisiCalc, MySpace, all of them. But the ones that won ultimately are the improved strategies. So in retail, Kmart was one of the first ones with a big store. Walmart ultimately won, and Sam Walton is one of the companies we funded. So innovative products are sharky. You can get on TV, but if you want to succeed, focus on the innovative or the improved strategies. Steve Jobs, one of the greatest entrepreneurs of the last 50 years, said it beautifully. He said, we have always been shameless about stealing great ideas, but somehow we have made that into a sin in business. I don't know why. If we are about profits, let's go after profits. It's skill-based, not VC-based. This is the other lie. Basically, everybody says, I have this idea, I need capital. I interviewed an entrepreneur called Joe Martin, who came to our program called Unicorn Entrepreneurs last week. He has got a $500 million business that he built in 7 years. He started with $375 because he had terrific skills. And I want to somehow codify those. So he's skills-based, not VC-based. What this is showing is that out of 85 unicorn entrepreneurs, 6% in the US got venture capital early, and all of them in the red lost control of their business. 18% got it late. These are people like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, and they kept control. And 76% never got venture capital. If you look at the last row, the wealth kept to wealth created. The VC early kept 7%, the VC late kept 16%, and the VC never kept 52%. And Michael Bloomberg has kept 84%. So if you want to become rich from your idea or in your business, avoid VC or delay them. How do unicorn entrepreneurs grow? Essentially, the first step to unicorn entrepreneurship is business smart, strategies, and skills. I kind of put this into 7 steps so people can follow it. And I came up with this book about 2 years ago. It was co-published with Inc. magazine. And what does business smart strategies mean? Essentially, it means only 1% of unicorn entrepreneurs succeeded due to the product. 99% succeeded due to strategy, development, and execution. No VC or late VC. Lessons is we can teach them. The skills that they need to know is opportunity and strategy skills in order to create more wealth with the limited capital they can raise. The second step is finance secrets of billion-dollar entrepreneurs. And interestingly, I got a call from Jackie Sosa, and she said, we're starting this publishing thing at FIU COB. So I said, fine, you can publish mine. And they're publishing it in the fall. And so it'll be the first book, I think, under the FIU imprint. It's Capital Smart, Strategies and Skills. And what this is focused on is the financial aspect. VCs finance after AHA. Unicorn entrepreneurs have to get to AHA without VC. VCs seek control. Unicorn entrepreneurs keep control. VCs fail on 80% of their ventures. Unicorn entrepreneurs like to succeed. VCs dilute heavily before leadership AHA. And unicorn entrepreneurs like to keep the wealth they create. And the most important point is that venture capitalists need unicorn entrepreneurs to get to AHA. They don't fund you before AHA. But somehow they made it into where they are the desirable thing and the entrepreneurs are not. Don't get me wrong, I used to be a VC, I used to play the same game. But the reality, now that I'm unbiased, is that VC requires entrepreneurs, unicorn entrepreneurs. The skills they need is financing and launching skills. How do you raise limited amounts of capital? And how do you launch with limited capital? The third step to unicorn entrepreneurship is corporate smart strategies and skills. I don't know if I'm going to write a book on this. I have the material, but I need family approval. But the corporate smart strategies are my wife, incidentally, controlling high growth ventures, organizing advantage in emerging industries, and leading. And this is how you can take a successful business and make it into a huge business. I'm talking to Jackie about organizing a workshop on this sometime the next year. And the skills you need are control, organization, and leadership. How do you keep the maximum percentage of the wealth that you've created? So in conclusion, what should business schools emphasize? This has been my pet peeve for a long time. We should teach skills. We should teach capital smart strategies, not what we teach right now. We should make Shark Tanks and pitch contests and outlaw them, because that is glorifying instinct, which is another word for gambling. If that's what we are all about, you don't need to come to school. You can go to a casino. The reality is that no one can see potential before AHA, including VCs. They wait for AHA, and then the last statistic you see, 4% of VCs earn 95% of VC profits. 95. I will leave it up to you to guess where those people are and the 4 AHAs there. how can corporations develop unicorns? This is something that I'm talking to a corporation about, trying to figure out how I can teach them. A, identify relevant trends. B, train employees to get to AHA with unicorn strategies, bootstrapping strategies, and finance after AHA when the risk is reduced. So these are the three, and we can talk about that. This is a program that we launched last September, and we had about 160 entrepreneurs and students. It's gone quite well. They don't have the money to do the second part of it, unfortunately, but maybe Bill and Joanne can approve this again with some more money. And we actually made money on this. We made $8,000. It's sitting somewhere. It's a program to teach the secrets of unicorn entrepreneurs so that they can grow their own venture. And somebody asked me when I suggested this 2 or 3 years ago to some other professor, saying, where else has this been taught? And I said, why? Are we too insecure to teach it ourselves as an innovator? And so I basically have taught this for 3 years at Harvard. I'll be teaching the third year in July, and at Stanford and Inca in Costa Rica. And that's all I have. So thank you so much.
That was great, Dileep. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Thank you again for sharing those words of wisdom on unicorn entrepreneurs and some of the tactics that, you know, not taking VC gets us. So thank you. So next up to our, thank you very much. Thank you. And the skills that it takes, and the resiliency too. I feel that a lot of our entrepreneurs have exhibited in our alums. So thank you. I think that everyone who's here and anybody who's listening to the recording later on is going to be just absolutely floored with some of those things that you shared. So next up to our virtual stage is our very own Sungu, who is one of our faculty members who teaches happiness at work. And during this time, I think we all are in very much need, Sungu, of some happiness. So I will allow you to come onto our virtual stage and please share with us your pearls of wisdom as it relates to happiness during this time, leading, and those kind of things. This will be our last faculty member for our lightning round.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it worked. Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much, and I want to thank everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here, to be with all of you. I'm so excited to be here. I know that we're going through really some challenging times right now, but like Yanin said, I don't think that this topic could be even more important. This is the time to really focus on this topic because of the challenging times that we're going through. Now, let me do share screen with you so I can put my presentation on and everybody can hear me perfectly, right? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm a faculty member in the Global Leadership and Management Department. I've been at FIU since 2006. I love my job and I love this topic that I teach. So I only have 15 minutes with you. I put my stopwatch on, so hopefully I'm going to be under 15 minutes, but you never know. So as you know, there have been so many new trends and developments over the years, and especially now we have more automation than before. You know, we have increased globalization. You know, we talk about artificial and emotional intelligence. We are using more robots in the workplace, like it's the case with Amazon and some of the other companies. And we have now 5G, which means that we're going to have instant sharing, you know, instant sharing of data and things in that nature. We have more digitalization than ever before, especially with remote work. We are definitely more and more digitalizing. And of course, we have our ever expanding social media. And for those of you who did not notice, we have the Generation Z that joined in our workforce. So Generation Z, for those of you who don't know about them as much, this is an all digital generation. So they grew up in a digital world, unlike some of us who are a little bit more dinosaurs. So Generation Z is with us. So these are all the different trends and developments that have been happening. New technologies are coming up, and you probably feel a little bit strained because you're trying to catch up with everything, and it's just not easy, right? There's just so much going on. And then on top of all these developments, we have the COVID situation. Some of us are doing remote work. We're probably enhancing our technology skills, but there are also disadvantages that come with doing remote work. Some of us are working in pandemic conditions, whether it's working in hospitals, for grocery stores, working in transportation. We definitely are seeing increased unemployment, however temporary, partially it might be. It's definitely a challenging environment for many of the businesses. And at the individual level, some of us feel uncertainty, feel loneliness, grief. And also it's a time for many of us to do self-reflection and even spend time with our loved ones. And also you're probably seeing more kindness out there, people collaborating, cooperating, and people are adapting. It's incredible how adapting human beings are. We not only adapt to good things that happen, but we also adapt to challenging scenarios more than what we realize. We also see people, getting very creative during this challenging time because we are strapped for resources in some ways. So we're getting more creative. We're instilling courage within ourselves, within our children, within our neighbors. So there's definitely some good that's going on, even though we're definitely going through some challenging times. Now, these are the things that are going on in our environment right now. So you might be asking, well, obviously we're going through these times right now. Why should we even talk about the topic of happiness? Now, I must tell you, the reason why people sometimes wonder about that is because they're not necessarily aware of how much of an impact happiness makes on people's lives and on organizations. Let me share with you some research findings. It's just going to be a little sneak preview because I only have a very limited amount of time with you. So for example, research shows that people that are employees that are happier, or people in general that are happier, they're more productive in their jobs, they're better leaders, they're better negotiators, they actually make more money, they're more creative, more cooperative, more flexible in their thinking. And also this one is so huge right now, they're more resilient in the face of hardship. So when you're happier, your performance not only goes up and you not only become more cooperative and creative, but you also become more resilient when challenges come around. And now you might be thinking, okay, that's great. There's definitely a case to be made for being happier, but what happens at the workplace? Does that really matter if we have happier employees in the workplace? Well, as it turns out, in the workplace, when employees are more satisfied with their jobs, not only their individual level of performance goes up, but actually companies that have happier employees benefit from higher levels of organizational performance. Also, when individuals are more satisfied with their jobs, they're likely to go above and beyond their job duties. The customer satisfaction levels go up for the companies, there's less absenteeism, and there's less turnover. And also, employees that are more satisfied in their jobs, they're less likely to do counteractive work behavior, such as stealing from the company. So all around, happiness does not just help individuals be more productive and perform at a higher level, but it actually makes good business sense. That's why we're seeing companies like Yahoo, Google, SaaS software company, FIU. That's why we're seeing all these organizations spend time, effort, and resources on the well-being of their employees. I think the percentages is somewhere around 60-something%, where 60% of the companies out there have been including wellness programs in their organizations. And so if the rest of the companies does not tag along with that, that can have obviously repercussions for the future of those companies. Now you might be asking, okay, great. So we understand that happiness matters. It makes good business sense. But what determines happiness? Well, as it turns out, you might not like this so much, but 50% of it is genetic. Now, 50% of our happiness comes from genetic factors. At the same time, there's research that shows that if we do positive, intentional, consistent activities that make us happier, that actually can affect our genetic set point. So by doing, and I'm going to give some examples in a little bit, by doing positive, consistent activities to enhance our own well-being and happiness, we actually are able to rewire how the neurons in our brains are connected to one another, and therefore be less susceptible to the genetic factors concerning happiness. So, and that intentional activity, you can actually see on the slides right now, the intentional activity meaning the positive, consistent actions that we can take to enhance our overall happiness and well-being, that explains 40% of our happiness. Let me repeat that. It explains 40, not 4. 40% of our happiness comes from things that are very much under our own control. And as it turns out, research, and by the way, when I say research in this scenario, I'm talking about research, a research paper that have studied hundreds and hundreds of research findings out there to come up with this chart. And what they found is that approximately 10% of our happiness come from our circumstances, such as where we live, who our friends are, what our family is like. So our circumstances only affect 10%, and only 10% of our happiness comes from our circumstances. Now, the reason for that is researchers believe that it's because we as human beings are very good at adapting. When something great happens, we feel great for a while, and then we revert back to our original level of happiness. Same thing is true when something bad happens. We go through a challenge, we feel pretty miserable for a while, and then after a while, within about a year or so, we revert back to our original level of happiness. So human beings are really amazing with adapting. Now, so when you look at this chart, what you're seeing is that intentional activity is huge. So obviously there are positive, consistent actions that we can take so that we can not only benefit from the 40%, right? So 40% of our happiness comes from that, but we can also move the genetic factor, especially if we come from families and backgrounds where we're not as oriented towards happiness, and we can still work on our circumstance because it still explains 10% of our happiness. Okay, I'm checking the stopwatch. Okay, so you might be asking to yourself, okay, so what are the intentional activities that we can take? Now, a lot of people look at this, and these are just examples from research. There are actually others that I don't have the time to share with you today, but a lot of people look at these things and go, okay, they're just common sense. Yes, but how often something is common sense, yet we don't do it? Very often, right? We don't do a lot of things that we know are common sense, but we don't do them. So as it turns out, research shows that people that feel the feelings of gratitude, even write it down a couple of times a week, and expressing gratitude towards others, they actually increase their happiness markedly. Another one is practicing acts of kindness, and this one is interesting. Research shows that it doesn't help when we're kind to others just 3 times a week. Research shows that kindness helps when we actually do it a number of times on a given day, and it could be small things such as saying something nice to someone to let them know how much you appreciate them. It could be, maybe not right now, but when we're out and about, opening the door to somebody who is following us. So it doesn't have to be anything that is too costly or time consuming, but little acts of kindness actually enhances our level of happiness. Another one is cultivating and nurturing social relationships. Another one is juicing as much joy as we can out of each moment, as much as humanly possible. And also meditating on kindness and passion. And that is good and wonderful that you can focus and meditate on. That's definitely huge. Physical activity is another one, and the list goes on. Practicing religion, spirituality. Again, I don't have time to go over all of those, so I just picked some of the top ones here. Another one, this is huge. I remember I shadowed my uncle. Now he's retired, but he was a very top level leader back home. Having so many employees and very successful all these years. And when I shadowed him for a day, what I found was that he was so effective and efficient, yet he used humor all the time. So when he would be interacting with his staff, you could tell that he was friendly, but he was also serious, but he would also crack jokes. And there could be, he would crack a joke, and then for a few seconds, people would laugh, and then they would just get back to task very quickly. So he knew how to be very effective and efficient, and at the same time, use humor and laughter in the workplace. If you're saying, I'm a man and I can't laugh as much, that's not true. You can be a man or a woman. It doesn't matter. You can totally use more humor and laughter in the workplace. And you probably have heard the phrase, laughter is great medicine. Now you might be asking, okay, so how can we make organizations happier? As in, how can we make our employees happier so that organizational performance goes up, turnover goes down? Again, the list goes on. So one huge thing that research finds is that we got to remove burdens off of our employees. That's huge. So if you can have daycare in your organization or within the facilities of your organization, or if you can have dry cleaning services, anything that you can do for your employees to reduce their overall life burdens is huge. Another one is job security. I remember we had a dean several years ago, right after 2007, when the economic crash happened. Right after, the first thing that our dean said was, she said, we're going to let go of all our resources, everything, but we're never and ever going to let go of our people. So imagine going into a meeting like that, faculty, staff, you name it, and the first thing that you're hearing right after the crash is your leader is telling you, we're going to let go of everything but not our people. So job security is really very important. Okay, so another one is appreciation your employees, creating health, wellness, and fitness packages for your employees, respecting your employees, and also providing them with a dignified treatment, creating cooperation and friendship among your team members, sharing information, communicating clearly with your employees. All of these are great contributors to happiness. Okay, I have one more minute. So another top contributor to happiness in organizations, and Bill mentioned that in one of his slides, creating opportunities for employees to receive training is huge, not just in terms of technical skills, including technology skills, but also soft skills, such as, teaching your employees how to be happier, how to be resilient, how to cultivate relationships, how to appreciate one another. Simple things like that goes a long way. And also, as it turns out, when employees are empowered or they can work autonomously in team situations, they're so much more happier. Okay, so what's the bottom line? So I have so limited time with you, but I just wanted to end it with saying, given where research is on happiness and happiness at work, one of the top things that we can do, let's say as employers, is number one, lift burdens, general life burdens off of your employees in any creative way you can think of, whether it costs you money, it doesn't. Maybe it's just as simple, it's just simply arranging for dry cleaning services to visit your employees inside the workplace, pick the clothes, get them cleaned, get them back. So, things like that doesn't really cost the organization a whole lot of money, but things that can be easily done. So the second idea that I want you to take away is happiness makes good business sense. So it's not just good for the individuals, but it's great for the organizations, because the organization's performance increases and turnover goes down. Okay. Another one is happiness and well-being is so important, and 60-something% of companies out there already have wellness related programs, but just because it's important doesn't mean that we're actually doing it. So it's important to consider employee well-being as a priority and actually take initiatives. So you probably have heard of companies like Yahoo, Google, Zappos, SAS, FIU, and other organizations who do so much for their employees so that their employees are happier, satisfied, and their performance goes up, their productivity goes up. They offer free lunches, coffee, snacks, free gym. They offer flex schedule. They provide comfortable chairs. They provide great indoor design, even massage services. Again, health, wellness, fitness packages. They provide training. They appreciate their employees. They respect their employees. They use humor and laughter in the workplace. They have some companies have game rooms where you can go and then play some games over lunch. Maybe you're going out every Friday with your teammates. So, I mean, these are just small examples, but there's so much we can do for our employees so that they're happier, and some of them does not cost a thing. For example, appreciating somebody else does not cost us any money. Respecting other people does not cost us any money. So there are really a lot of things that companies can do, whether they need to spend money on it or not, to actually increase their employee happiness and well-being. So I want to close up by saying that, yes, it's important for companies to take the measures that they need to take to enhance employee well-being, but your own well-being is also very important. So kind of going back to the slide where I talked about intentional activities, these explain 40% of your happiness. So if you do what you need to do, those little positive, consistent activities that you can do throughout the day as much as you can, if you take those action steps to actually enhance your happiness, that's going to explain 40% of your happiness. So if you're a leader, you're an employer, whomever you might be, it's very important for you to also invest in your own well-being and happiness. Well, I think I talked the fastest I could, and I'm still over 3 minutes. So thank you everyone for listening to me for an extra 3 minutes, but I really wanted to get everything out. So
thank you, Sungu. Really appreciate all the other made up 30 seconds here and there came into the 3 minutes. So thank you so much for just sharing with us this afternoon some of these techniques and some of the things that we can implement as the corporations that are going to be watching this later on, and the ones that are watching it now, organizations and alumni leaders, and what they can do, and some of the simple practices of just being kind. So, thank you again and for sharing that.
Thank you.
So everyone, the time has arrived where we will be doing a little bit. So we want to have, since we have our intimate group here and we have our, we want to take your questions, but we'd like to be able to do so in our breakout room settings. And so what's going to happen now, if you have never participated in these breakout rooms, I'm going to walk you through what this looks like. And you'll be able to ask our faculty any of the pressing questions that you have. I know our faculty are here still with us and are able to answer some questions. But this is basically how it's going to work. So I'm going to quickly share my screen so I can kind of tell you about a little bit about the rules of engagement here. So we're going to have about anywhere between 4 to 5 people in a room, including our faculty member. One of the things, what we'll do is that we'll do a 15-minute rotation. And so what we'll do at that point is you can introduce yourself, where you're from. Our faculty can do as well. And then, an icebreaker question is what are you looking forward to? What are the things? Maybe what's your favorite quarantine snack? That's another one that we can ice break as well with. But we want to just get to know each other, do some networking at this point. We also would love for this to be also a platform for you to ask your questions. So any questions that you may have, this is something that we'll do. This is the first time we do this with our virtual industry day. And so we wanted to just test it out. And so thank you so much for being willing and able and to be a participant in this.